Okay, let's go ahead and get started with our webinar. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So, very warm welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to explore the Matomo Analytics plugin or integration in DSpace. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all here in attendance today. And also our panelists. Our panelists today, our presenters are Giuseppe Digilio from ForScience, a DSpace Platinum service provider. And then we're also very happy to have with us David Steelman and Amy Swackhamer from the University of Maryland Libraries, and they're a DSpace Bronze member. My name is Holger Lenz, and I'm the DSpace Program Coordinator. I'll be your host for today. So I'm looking very much forward to this very interesting webinar and learning more about the Matomo integration in DSpace. So let's go ahead and move forward here. Just a very brief note on this webinar. This webinar is part of the DSpace Deep Dive webinar series. What is the DSpace Deep Dive webinar series? Well, it's just basically a community effort where we have regular webinars from the community for the community. So as you can see today, we have community members, we have a Platinum service provider, we have DSpace users, a DSpace Bronze member with the University of Maryland Libraries here with us. And these topics on these webinars can be really about anything you'd like to present in terms of DSpace. Could be featuring an integration like today, could be a migration story, could be any kind of customization, or maybe in some way that you're geeking out about DSpace, like to show the community what you've done with your repository. If you're interested in presenting, there's the link here on the bottom of the slide here. Feel free to reach out to us. And you get a little bit of an idea here when you visit that website as well of what it's about. All of the events are recorded, and today's event also is recorded and will be made available to the community later on. And of course, like with all of our events, they're always free to attend as well. So just a very brief pitch for our DSpace Deep Dive webinar series. A brief overview of today's webinar, what you can expect. We're going to have first, after some housekeeping items that I'll just mention, we have a technical and conceptual explanation of the plugin. That's going to be done by Giuseppe. Then we're going to have David show us the configuration of Matomo in DSpace 9. And then we're going to have a demo of the Matomo interface that's been done by Amy. And then after that, you have the opportunity to ask questions. For that, we would like to ask you to please use the Q&A feature in Zoom here. So you may have to click on your More button in the Zoom taskbar to activate that or to see that. But as you can see on the slide here, there should be a little icon that says Q&A. And so when you click on that, that's where we would like to please put your questions, because it helps us to organize the questions, and it's easier for us to make sure that we have all questions in the same place rather than using the chat. We would like to encourage you to ask you to please use the Q&A feature for that. Other than that, trying to think if there's anything else in terms of housekeeping. You cannot unmute yourself. I think that's the other thing I can mention. There is no unmuting. So please, if you have a comment or question, please use the Q&A function for that as well. All right, then we're going to go right ahead into the content. And I will just very briefly mention how this webinar really came about. Why do we have Matomo integration in DSpace? What happened is that the University of Maryland Libraries contracted with ForScience to develop this Matomo integration in DSpace, and that happened in November 2024. But the agreement was, and the stipulation was, that this integration would be made available as a community contribution to DSpace. And that's really a beautiful thing. And we want to thank the University of Maryland Libraries and ForScience for doing that and working on that, because it's a nice example of how community-led development can work and how we can bring things back into DSpace that are developed. And so work was completed in March 2025 and now is part of DSpace 9. It's part of the core of DSpace 9. So it's built in. You don't have to install it as an extra add-on, and you can see the REST backend and the Angular front end URLs mentioned here. That's just a very brief background as to the partnership and how that integration ended up in DSpace. And now I will go ahead and hand it off to Giuseppe Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm Giuseppe Digilio. I'm Deputy CTO for Science and DSpace committer. Thank you for joining this session on Matomo Analytics in this space. Yeah, we can go with the agenda. Today we will explore how Matomo can change repository analytics, why it's a great alternative to Google Analytics, and how the integration work technically. So let's begin with an overview of Matomo. We can go on. Thanks. Matomo is an open source analytic platform designed with privacy as its core. It's fully GDPR compliant, so it ensures secure data handling. Generally, Matomo can be deployed as self-hosted or in a private cloud. Giving the organization more flexibility. Uh, Matomo provides comprehensive insights into user behavior. So we can with DSpace we can track page view, download, and everything is needed for having informed decision on our repository. Unlike proprietary analytics tool, as we said, Matomo gives a complete control over the data. So the data is processed and is not stored in the third-party server, like, for example, happen with Google Analytics. So you can have data on your server or on your private cloud, and you can decide who has access to data. This means fully ownership, transparency, and compliance with the regulation like GDPR. Okay, next, please. Now, why we should integrate Matomo with DSpace. Basically, the space repository are rich in content, but without analytic, it's hard to measure impact on our repository. So integration with Matomo transforms raw usage data into actionable insights. By understanding how user interact with your repository. So repository manager can make informed decision that enhance content visibility, improve the overall user experience in the repository. Okay, let's look the conceptual architecture behind the integration of Matomo in DSpace. Next, please. Essentially, the architecture is organized into 3 layers. Both Angular and REST APIs play a key role communicating with Matomo. On Angular side, there is an embedded tracking to capture navigation events. And on backend side, there are specific endpoints to handle specific action like bitstream download. This dual approach ensures that we capture both user navigation and content access, providing a complete picture of the repository usage. Finally, all this data flow into the Matomo dashboard, where it's transformed into actionable insight. Next, please. How does DSpace actually capture event? And which are the events that are captured by actually by this integration? DSpace generally tracks page views, downloads, search query, external click like DOI, and so in every time, for example, we navigate to an item, a collection, or a community page, that's tracked. When a bitstream is downloaded, we can capture this event. The same when the user search in our repository. The query parameter is saved in our tracking. Next, please. Apart from all the current the current event in future version, we could provide out of the box tracking of other action to give deeper insight into user engagement. This is a list of possible future trackable action that are not currently implemented. Now let's dive deeper into how the plugin works. So in the next slide, essentially, the plugin works as I already said, on two levels. At the front end level, we have the Angular interface that is what the user see and interact with their browser. When a user loads the DSpace repository, the Angular application dynamically injects the Matomo tracking script into the DOM. This is not hard-coded because it's the script is conditionally loaded based primarily on the environment setting, but most important, based on the consent state. For what we said, Matomo is provided the GDPR compliance, so it's important that the application can start tracking of the navigation event only after the cookie concept is accepted. So once is injected, the script start to capture all the navigation events that I mentioned before. The mechanism of tracking navigation event is important because DSpace it's a single page application, so the navigation doesn't reload the full page like traditional website. So navigation events are important to keep track of the user navigation. And each navigation is triggered with metadata about what the user is viewing. Then they are sent to Matomo. On the REST side, the API exposes endpoints for backend action like downloads. Also here, including metadata for detailed analytics. These actions are separated from the Angular part because, for example, the download of a file can be also done without accessing the space repository, but by accessing the direct link. So this part is important to keep track of the content navigation. Next, please. This is how generally the cookie concept are handled in DSpace with a third-party plugin named Origime, and as we can see, there is a specific point for accepting the usage of in this case of the Matomo insights. And this is what can enable can start the application tracking of the navigation event. Without the acceptance, DSpace doesn't track the event. Next, please. Instead, this is an example of how is made the request to the Matomo server by using the tracking script. As we can see, there are some specific information about the page with some additional information that are used by Matomo to collect and give a profile of the user which is navigating our repository. Next, please. As additional point, here is just a mention about how Matomo can be integrated with Docker. Is fully integrated also with DSpace container. It is simplify the deployment and provides also possibility of easy scaling our deployment. And this approach is ideal for both cloud and on-premise setups. Next, please. Yeah, finally, there is a comparison between Matomo and Google Analytics. About the privacy, as we say, Matomo is GDPR compliant, while Google share data. For about the hosting, Matomo support self-hosted and cloud. Google is cloud only. Matomo is free for self-hosted installation. Google is free, but there are limitations. With Matomo, we have only full control of our data, while is limited on Google. So, yeah, if there are no questions, I can give the floor to David.
Yeah, thank you, Giuseppe. We're gonna come back to questions later after the presentation. So appreciate you taking us through that, and we'll hand over to David.
Thanks, Giuseppe. This section will describe how to configure DSpace to use Matomo. Just DSpace itself. I'm not going to get into trying to set up your own Matomo because we're using the cloud-based Matomo. So I actually have no idea how to actually set up Matomo. But I'll just concentrate on setting up Matomo in DSpace. It'll be pretty short because as a stock DSpace feature, the basic setup is very straightforward. So go to the next slide, please. So first off, who am I? My name is David Steelman. I'm a software developer in the University of Maryland Libraries. I wasn't here at the time, but UMD Libraries has been using DSpace for about 14 years, since at least version 1.7.0. My personal involvement with DSpace began with the library's migration from DSpace 6 to DSpace 7. And so, I've been using it pretty much ever since. Next slide, please. So just to provide a little background on our setup, the University of Maryland Libraries actually supports two DSpace instances. The first is DRUM, which stands for Digital Repository University of Maryland, which serves as the institutional repository for the scholarly output from the university system's flagship campus at College Park. The other is MD-SOAR, the Maryland Shared open access repository, which is a shared repository for 13 colleges and universities in the University of Maryland and affiliated institutions library consortium, which we just normally refer to as USMAI. Our drum instance is pretty customized, while the MD-SOAR instance is largely a stock DSpace instance. And our drum instance uses Matomo, as I said, with the cloud with using Matomo's cloud provider as the server, and while MD-SOAR uses Google Analytics. Next slide, please. As was mentioned, Matomo integration is available by default in DSpace 9 and later. Documentation for the DSpace 9 version is at this URL. So, it's there to look at. Hopefully it's complete, but if not, it can be improved. Next slide, please. As a built-in DSpace feature, enabling Matomo simply requires adding the necessary configuration properties to the DSpace instance. The properties are specified in the DSpace config modules matomo.cfg file, which in standard DSpace fashion is typically configured in a site's DSpace config local.cfg file. There are 3 properties that must be configured. There's the Matomo enabled property, which has reset to true to enable Matomo integration. The Matomo request site ID property, which is the site ID in your Matomo configuration to send the activity to, and the Matomo tracker URL, which is the Matomo server URL to send activity to. The values for the Matomo request ID and Matomo tracker ID are typically provided by your local friendly Matomo administrator. Next slide, please. Here's an example. So the initial setup is really just a matter of setting up the 3 properties as shown here. None of them are secret, so there's no problem with storing them with the rest of your site configuration. The Matomo enabled property is hopefully self-explanatory. Setting it to true enables it, setting it to false, disables it. And as I mentioned in the last slide, both the Matomo request site ID and the Matomo tracker URL you get from your Matomo dashboard, either from the cloud or if you've set it up yourself. I'm sure it's in there somewhere. I've never actually done that, so not quite sure, but I assume it's similar. Next slide, please. Setting up basic Matomo Analytics only requires those 3 properties from the previous slide, and that is what we actually use for our drum instance. Matomo does support sending additional attributes, which are detailed in the URL at the bottom of the slide. Some of these attributes may require an authentication token from the Matomo server, which would need to be provided to DSpace. The DSpace configuration file has information about setting up the authentication token if you need that. But for the basic setup, it's just those 3 properties. You don't need an authentication token, and as I said, that's what we use for our drum. Next slide, please. As a stock DSpace feature, community support should be available from the DSpace mailing list at dspacetech@googlegroups.com. And that's about it. I'll now pass things on to my University of Maryland library colleagues, Amy Swackhamer, for a demo of the Matomo website interface.
Thank you, David. I'm just waiting for Holger to advance.
I'm sorry,
Oh, sorry, you did
apologize.
it. Sorry. No,
Go
that's
ahead.
fine. All right. Well, thanks, presenters so far. I guess you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Holger. Okay, so I'll give a couple of caveats before I get started. So one, this part is not a live demo. At the end later, if people want me to screen share, but I put in just shots of some things just in case there are any technical problems or whatever. I thought it would be easier. I also am not primarily a DSpace user. Most of the websites I manage are other types of websites. We do use Matomo on a variety of our websites. But I think that even what's provided just by default in Matomo might be very helpful and interesting because I suspect it's the things that people would be interested in. I don't know for sure because our person who was coordinating the content aspect of our DSpace instance for Drum, that is, retired just about when we got the analytics working and has not been replaced yet. So I don't have someone I actively work on that. It's kind of guesswork on my part. Okay, so in this slide here, you can see here a list of our sites. You can track multiple properties in a single cloud instance of Matomo. You get a dashboard with categories for different types of interactions with the site on the left. In that aspect, I find it a little reminiscent of the old Google, like maybe Google Universal Analytics. I don't know how many of you are Google users, but I may not know super specific questions comparing it to Google because I don't use it anymore. We switched when they made everyone move to Google Analytics 4, but also it was mainly for privacy reasons, which is something Giuseppe had talked about earlier in his presentation. If anyone is interested in that aspect of things, you can reach out to me and ask me because I ended up doing a bunch of research into that topic. Okay, could I have the next slide? Okay, so page views, obviously a very basic metric for website measurement. You can get page views and unique page views. There are under the behavior section, the menus on the left that I had talked about. It contains a lot of most of what people want is in the behavior section, although there's some other areas I'll also talk about. There's different ways that you can look at the content on your site. There's pages, which is URL paths, and that is, for us at least, the files that we have let people download. Those are only accessible as pages, which is the path, because they don't have the titles don't come through. Page titles shows the titles of a page on your site. So if you have things organized in different ways, you can look at those differently. If you look at, I don't know how well you can see in the screenshot there, but there's these little green icons under the page titles label in the screen capture I have. Matomo has a lot of little green icons that are kind of how you do a lot of functions, and they're common on a lot of the different metrics. So if you see those, you'll know, oh, this is the one that does this thing. Those ones are persistent at the top of a data table. If you hover on a row for a page, like you can see one of them is highlighted there and has icons next to it, you'll see icons appear. And that's another thing that Matomo's gotten a little less hover oriented, which is good. There's more stuff that is persistent in the interface, but some things you won't see unless you hover your pointer over that content. Could you go to the next slide? All right. So one of the green icons is for transitions, which shows you part of a path. If you're looking at a certain page or item on your site, it'll show you where people came from to reach that, how they got there, and then where they went to afterwards. I'm not sure with DSpace how critical that is, but it could be if you have collections or something and you want to see, are people finding this with a search engine? Are they being referred from another website? Are they coming through the homepage and navigating to it? So you can explore that kind of thing there. If you look on the left, you can see there's little pluses. You can open up each category of referrer and see what's in there. This is one of the ways to get referrer data, but there are others. And then you can also see, of course, where people went to. Could I have the next slide? Another one of the little icon controls shows row evolution. And what that means, I'm not sure why it's labeled that way, but it really just means the traffic to a page or item across time. So if you want to see, hey, we posted about this thing, or this was recently added, how much traffic does it get when it's first added versus later? You can look at the trends there on a graph. You can a lot of this data you can export as either tables. Some of the ones that are like an infographic like this, you can export as an image if you want to too. But of course, you could just take a screen capture like I did. Could I have the next slide? There's a segmented visits log as one of the icons, which shows you details about people who visited a page. Because Matomo is privacy oriented, they anonymize the end of the IP address. You shouldn't be able to identify who a person is, but it will tell you maybe, someone in New York City who's using a Windows machine on Windows 11 used Chrome to browse these 10 pages. So if you're interested in seeing where people for certain items come from, then then that's something that you can do with this section. I'm just going to check okay. Could I have the next slide? File downloads. This is a different section under behavior, but I think it's probably one of the ones that people who use a platform like DSpace would be interested in. And you can look at how many people have downloaded different ones of your files. Now, here's where I was saying that you can only really see it by path. You can see it's just a URL. It doesn't show the name of the file. So you can click on it and see what the file is. And I don't know if most of you are people who look at the content within your DSpace or just the technical parts. So that might be something more that people who are focused on content would care about, which files are getting downloaded. Could I have the next slide? Okay. The behavior section of the analytics tool also has a site search section, which is pretty interesting to see what people are searching on your DSpace account. It's one of the it's a type of website, at least for us, that has like a very long tail though. So you could export the whole list of what people searched for, but you'd get a lot of search terms, many of which have only been searched once or twice. But it is interesting if people want to see what types of topics are people looking in here for. Okay. Could I have the next slide again? So acquisitions, something that I talked about before, which is how do people get to you? Like who's sending people to your site? And direct entry is when someone maybe has a bookmarked or just types in the URL, as you probably know if you are familiar with analytics. It'll show you which search engines people use. You cannot see what terms generally, you can't see what terms people entered in the search engine to get to your site, though you can just see which search engines they came from. They recently added AI assistants as a referrer type, which is interesting if you want to see which AI tools, like for us, ChatGPT is by far the most popular. But if that's something that interests people who deal with your content in DSpace, then that's something you can check out. Could I have the next slide? Another section of the left-hand menu is the visitors section. It lets you look at a variety of things like where your visitors are from, what software and type of device they're using. So, like in my past dealing with websites, that might be relevant if you think, oh, this doesn't display well on small screens like smartphones. Is this something that we should be worried about? How many people use them? You could look at things like that in there. So that section really lets you explore a bit what type of people are looking at your site. It also lets you see what time of day people are visiting your site if you care about that, or what days of the week. Could I get the next slide again? There we go. So I wanted to add a few more comments about the interface that I didn't make slides for. One is Matomo lets you set up custom dashboards if you want to gather you only care about some of the data and you want to put it all together on a dashboard, you could do that. You can set up custom reports to send to people. You can set up custom segments of visitors. So if you really cared about some subset of people. Like we want to know what people, we have we have a lot of Japanese content, for instance. So if we wanted to set up, not in DSpace, but in one of our other websites, if we wanted to track the people coming from Japan and see how many people are coming there, what are they looking at? Do we need to add more translation for that part of the site? Maybe it could help us look at that. So you could take any attributes of visitors that you can track and set up like a custom subset to follow those people if that's something that would help you. There's a plugin I want to mention. It's called Tracking Spam Prevention, but really what it is filtering out AI bot traffic. And I don't know if you all have the same problem, but AI bot traffic has really been plaguing a lot of our websites. It did interfere with our analytics until I turned this on. We had a few really giant spikes where it looked like hundreds of thousands of people were going to some obscure content, but it actually was AI bots doing it. So if you want to be able to filter that out, there's this plugin. If you have a cloud subscription with Matomo, it's just something that you can turn on. If you self-host, then it's a plugin you can install. Oh, and then I put up a document, and there's a URL there that is I took our user guide for Matomo, which primarily the section that talks about the common metrics that our users want to know about for websites and then how you access them. And it also gives some other information about using Matomo. So if you're interested in the interface or how the controls work or what the capabilities are, I will say that Matomo is a very feature-rich tool. And so I really only covered some basic aspects of it here in this presentation. There's actually a lot more it can do. We don't use all of its functionality, but it does provide the functionality that we do use. So we've been pretty happy with it so far. We've been using it, of course, for DSpace, we've only been using it since the summer, I think maybe June. But for our other websites, we've been using it for a little over 2 years, I think, and it's been working well for us so far. And I think that's, can I have the next slide? But I think it just says questions. Yes. So, all right, that's what I have. Feel free to ask questions if you have any.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Amy. That's great. And apologies, David. I should have thanked you earlier as well for your presentation. So thank you all, Giuseppe, David, and Amy, for that. Really enjoyed that and appreciate the presentations there. Just pulling up the Q&A here and seeing, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. See if there are any questions. And I see there is one from Tomasz. He says, does Matomo record the number of visitors who visit without consenting to cookies, either by rejecting cookies or by ignoring the prompt? Does anyone know the answer to that one?
I believe the answer is no, but I can't say for sure. Matomo does have a very extensive documentation system, like a knowledge base. So you could look that up for sure if you wanted to know the answer. Oh, it does track, I think we discussed this while we were setting up. I believe it tracks file downloads for people who don't want to be tracked, but not, maybe, I don't know if Giuseppe can confirm that. I think it tracks how many people downloaded a file, and that includes people who said, I don't want to be tracked, but it doesn't track other behavior. You activate this?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm wrong, but in the Matomo configuration, maybe there is a cookieless configuration that should provide that. But for sure, on the space side, we don't track any events without the cookie is accepted. So neither the page view is counted and tracked without the cookie consent that can be accepted also by anonymous user.
My understanding is, so you're talking about the front end there. So, because my understanding is the front end, that's true, that if they don't accept if they don't consent to the prompt, then it won't record any of
Yeah.
their things. But my understanding is, I believe that the backend will always send something when a file is downloaded. Even the consent doesn't apply to that. And I know I believe that was discussed in one of the issues in DSpace that was part of this whole supplying into DSpace, and it was decided that by the powers that be at DSpace that just the fact that a file was downloaded without, and I'm not, I believe that just the fact that if the person hasn't consented, I think it's just the fact that the file was downloaded is recorded. If the person did consent, then it can be, tied back to that anonymous person in the Matomo interface. But the fact that the file was downloaded will still be recorded even if someone didn't consent. And it was, there was some rationale for that, which I don't quite recall at the moment. But
Thank you, David. That's also what I remember.
So,
Great.
so there still could be some analytics coming from the back end, but I assume it's all within the GPDR. Not that I'm a lawyer, so I have no idea.
Okay, cool. Thank you for answering that question. We have another question from Barbara. She says, can you activate the spam prevention for certain sites, repositories only, or do you have to have one setting for all sites you track?
In our instance, when I turned it on, it applied to all of our sites. I have not explored if there's any way to only apply it to. Often their settings have a lot of different options and things you can set up. So you can also contact the company, but you might be able to find that in the knowledge base. So sorry, I don't know that for sure. But in our case, it's just applying to everything.
Cool, thank you. Very good. And then Kent was wondering, how does Matomo impact the performance of a DSpace site? Are there settings that draw on more technical resources than others?
It has a small impact because there are asynchronous requests made by the tracker JavaScript. So basically, it does have no impact on the navigation by the user.
Very good. So I just saw too that Tomasz posted in the chat here that he was wondering if a general proportion of consenting/non-consenting visitors is given. So confirming that. Okay. All right. We have another question. Can I get the recording soon? Yes, the recording will be made available. Let's see, today is Tuesday. I'll try to get it out to the community by the end of the week. If not, then latest by the beginning of next week. It'll come out. So. All right, just pausing here for a moment. And in the meantime, if you have other questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and again put the link to the documentation in the chat, as well as the link to the DSpace Tech Google group, or the email address for that. And thank you, Amy, too, for posting your contact information in the chat as well. Appreciate that. So if there are no questions or no more questions, just pausing here another moment to see if anyone else has anything to ask. So yeah, so you got the link for the documentation here. Also, just a reminder, David mentioned it earlier, the DSpace Tech Google group. If you have any technical questions regarding the plugin, feel free to post them there and ask questions on that mailing list. If you're not on the mailing list yet, think about joining that. That's one great resource as a support resource for you from the community. It's all community driven, all volunteer based. So, and then you also have Amy's email address in here in the chat as well. So, okay, well, if there are no other questions, thank you so much for joining the webinar today. Thank you to the presenters, Amy, Giuseppe, and David. Really appreciate you being here today, making yourself available and helping the community. And it's just a nice demonstration of how community-led development can work. And so just wanted to thank you for your work on that and for presenting today. And thank you all for joining. And we look forward to seeing you next time at our next DSpace Deep Dive webinar. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Holger.
Bye.